community. Lord, we thank you for this democracy that we live in. Lord, I thank you for the city council members and their willingness to serve. Father, I ask that you give us wisdom and discernment as we discuss and make plans for the future of our city. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order, and if you would, pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll begin our work session, have a discussion and provide direction regarding developing a strategy for improving communications between the city and residents, council member, Northeast Ward, and city manager. And I believe the city manager will begin.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Give me a second. Let me bring up the slides. Again, good afternoon. My name is Mario Canizar, City Manager. Wanted to bring an item to everyone's attention. We had Councilmember Bellinger and the mayor and I had met a couple of weeks ago to go over a number of issues. One of those was just city communications in general. If you recall, last council meeting, Chief Michael Self from the fire department presented a recap of our storm response from this past February, and to discuss just where things were. Certainly the communication efforts that we would like to do in the community. There was obviously, because of the circumstances, there was big areas of rooms for improvement with just the fact that power was down, technology was down. We had a number of areas that our normal media outlets were not functioning. Radios were not functioning. Radio stations were not functioning, so we weren't able to provide any information that way. But certainly we're always looking for ways to improve. We're also going to be embarking here in the next near term as an update, a refresh of our website. So one of the things that was brought forward when the mayor and Councilmember Bellinger and I talked about was how do we improve communications, not only certainly internal but external, certainly most importantly to our residents. And so the thought, and again, so I'm going to make some introductory comments and then turn it over to Councilmember Bellinger. The thought was, should the council consider appointing a task force to help look at the things that we do, take an inventory of the things that we do, give some recommendations on how we can certainly improve. So with that, if that's okay, I would turn it over to Councilmember Bellinger to kind of expound on that.
Sure, and one of the things that the last city council set as a priority was community engagement, which I think was absolutely wonderful. And we know that the staff and our city manager worked very, very hard and have done an excellent job in so many ways, including Chief Kiplinger and all the people who have been working under emergency services and who work with communications right now. So having other ideas is absolutely, is just in addition to all the hard work. So as far as community engagement goes, one tool is to get the professionals who are really good at a particular topic to be engaged in providing input and also assessing and thinking through, from the outside how things are. So when we were talking, I asked a couple of people to take a look at what we might do in a communications task force. So this is what they came up with, that it would be a strategy for improving communications between the city and residents. And that's not just communications from the city to the residents, but also from the residents to the city. So just taking a look at it from the outside, determine existing communication, so they kind of assess and talk to stakeholders, evaluate plans, and gather input from key communities. I know we've already talked several times about some communities have a very difficult time getting information because they, particularly, for example, older people sometimes don't have all of the access to internet, Facebook, the things that sometimes we take for granted. So they're a key community, people who can't afford subscriptions to a television who can't afford a computer, can't afford a cell phone. So getting input from those key communities, then looking and having assessing the findings, and then delivering conclusions and recommendations. So we thought a good idea might be to get a citizen, particularly professional task force to do this. And I had a couple of people who volunteered and who had and helped flesh this out. But I know we want a diverse task force. So we're just throwing this idea out to the city council. I'm personally not wed to it, but I think it's a great idea to get people from the outside who are experts. I'm certainly not an expert on communications. I can barely use my cell phone, so anyway.
Okay. So I guess next would be public comment on the item. Anybody here that wants to speak to this item? Okay. Then I guess we speak to the council. Mr. Anderson, any thoughts?
I would say certainly, you mentioned the website. I think it is probably due for an overhaul. That's certainly one area in which we can communicate better. Is as far as getting out into communities where there are a lot of residents who may not have access to internet, to television, as Councilmember Bellinger mentioned. I think I absolutely like the idea of doing a task force. Maybe if there's somebody from either I'm not sure exactly what departments at SFA might be most pertinent other than communications, obviously, but they're going to be more driven, I think, toward video and print and radio communications. I don't know exactly where in the university we might find somebody who would be more adept at communicating with those parts of the community in which those methods of communication are not really there, but or not as widespread anyway. But I'm all for the idea. I think it sounds like a good idea.
When we talked, Ms. Bellinger had a couple of excellent recommendations for people to serve on the task force. And then as we talked more, we thought, well, other council people may have ideas too, certainly people that come from different parts of the community. So you may want to introduce the two that you were thinking, and then we'll kind of go from there.
And I have thought of other ones too,
Okay,
from other parts of the community, but both Chris Hancock and Brad Mall. Brad Mall is up at the university. He does TV. He is an expert in all that. And Chris Hancock has worked in a variety of kinds of communications. I was also thinking about possibly having Mabel Cannings from the Solid Foundation, because her background is urban planning, and she's done a lot of like surveys and communications, but and I was also thinking of maybe Antonia, I've forgotten her last name, but she just cut my hair. She knows everybody and everything, and so just some fresh eyes, but I'm just tossing these names out, and we could actually ask those people to, if we could actually, we don't have to do it right now, but we could entertain some other ideas. Mario, you've got an
Well, and
idea
Mr.
here.
Hancock, he should be somewhat familiar with the city because he does have a contract with the Convention and Visitors Bureau to do some of our collateral. So we have already a contractual relationship with Mr. Hancock and his firm.
And there might be somebody with the public library staff that would be interested in participating as well, since they have interaction with the community that's different.
Right. I also just wanted to add that we have so many methods for communicating right now that it's really confusing sometimes. I mean, in this day and age, I'm not talking about the city, I'm just talking about everywhere. So I think we actually might even be, taking a leadership role in figuring out how a city and its residents can communicate with a task force. And a task force is also cheap, free.
Yeah, and her thought was volunteer, so,
That's right.
Mr. Mall, I hope you understood that piece.
You're telling me.
You get paid just as much as we do.
We'll double it. We'll pay you double our.
Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, I thank you, Mayor. I certainly like the idea in general, and I'm happy to hear the emphasis on diversity of representation on the task force, particularly. I mean, because some people, not just older communities mentioned, but people communicate in non-traditional,
Right.
academic or non-business ways. And so, I certainly like the idea. I think that the success will depend on who we put on the task force. And so I guess my questions, and I don't know where we are in the process in terms of how fleshed out this is, if we've decided how many people are going to be on the task force, or if that's what this is for. Okay. Well, yeah, then all of my questions kind of have to do with the details of how to make, but I certainly think that it's a good idea.
I do think it's something that we were wanting to try to undertake sooner than later. So I don't want to rush you, but maybe we could take a few days and maybe try to come up with a name or two. I don't know, I'm sorry, I cut Mr. Bolden out. Do you have anything else,
Oh, no, sir,
Yeah.
that was, yeah.
Mr. Bolden?
Yeah, may I introduce myself to you, Mayor? Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Recognize you because you had your tie and your coat.
Well, maybe that's your coat tie.
Well, the more the better as far as ways of communicating. We do have a lot of electronic media that we are getting more and more used to, but in some communities, it's a lot better to go face to face. It's more like of a hands-on, because they have fewer ways of getting to the electronic version of the media, such as when I say face to face, I'm like meetings that the task force calls and meet with them on certain nights of the month or every quarter, and also churches and other entities, businesses that not necessarily talk about the subject, but let the employees, church members, know when the meetings are, because now there's a lot of communities, they don't even know which night the city council meeting is on. So there is a need for communications, and we, I'm greatly would like to see the task force put together. But I would have concern with some of the names because that's already been called. But anyway, I'm greatly.
And I think that Ms. Bellinger and I were thinking maybe we'd each kind of contribute a couple, maybe something
Right.
along those lines. So certainly we want it to be diverse because we don't understand the communication in each piece of our community. So I think that's important. What do you think? How long do you think it might take for you to maybe to develop a couple of names?
Well, because if we're all developing names sort of in on our own in silos, then I might be thinking of somebody that Mr. Bolden's thinking of, or representatives of one community, and so there's going to be overlap, and then there's going to be overrepresentation.
Could we informally, I mean, I would not mind calling everybody and talking it over and then trying to make sure we have everybody's input and then finally sending out a list of names to everybody to
Or
introduce.
else we
Pardon?
let him be
Oh,
the,
sorry.
we would provide that information to the city manager.
Good.
Right, I
Good
mean,
idea.
my
Thank you.
suggestion to, again, not have a walking quorum,
Right.
is that if you have names, that let me be your, sort of your point, if that makes sense. Is this something that you want me to reach out to the prospective member, volunteer, whomever named that Councilmember Fisher recommended you, Mr. Smith, and you know, Jane Doe, to participate? Are you interested? I mean, is that what you'd like, or, I'm either way, or you just want me to just bring the names to you, if there's some
Yeah,
overlap?
Yeah, just so
let
we
you know,
don't
hey,
duplicate
the name's
question
already
to
been
that.
submitted.
Because if I submit a name, I'm most likely have already talked to that.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So
I
the
think
intent
that's
would
what
be, you send me the names to see if one of your names overlaps with some of the other names,
Exactly.
and if you have, let you know, hey, it's already been
Okay.
chosen. Do you have a different person?
Right, and
If
then
not, you're good to go.
Even if it's overlapped and that person is still undecided, maybe both of us would talk to that person and that might sway him. Okay,
Okay.
yes.
So we're looking at potentially 10 people, correct?
Is that too big or too?
No, I'm,
Well, just 10 people to look at, but not 10 people on the task force. I don't think it's,
Okay.
well, I don't know, maybe
That'd be
it may
fine.
not be a large number.
It's just a task.
I'm okay with 10 people.
And I also think Ms. Bellinger's vision was that this was a fairly short-term
Right.
job.
That's fine, yeah.
yeah, there's a beginning, and there would be sort of an end, because it's not a ongoing.
If I recall, I think we were talking about maybe having it, something by September, October, and there may be interim kinds of findings too. So I think it would probably have to be up to the task force to tell us. Maybe once it's created, it could review this and then come back and give us some timeframes and some suggestions. I did want to add that some of the, if, for example, we're going to be doing a lot of meetings, we might help the task force out with, because they're all volunteers, so we might be able to get like student help to come in to go to multiple communities, if that makes sense. I just thought they should be able to reach out and get other help that they want. So, are you on a
So
motion?
is this an opportunity to put a deadline on my bosses for once? I mean, would you be able to provide me names by, say, July, what's that, Friday in July, after council, the 6th?
What about a week?
Okay, well, if you can do it in a week, great.
I
But
cannot do it in a week. I'm going on vacation on Thursday, so
Yeah.
All right.
there's no way I can
Okay.
reach out to
July 9th.
people.
is that too long? Do you need till July 2nd? Or June 25th?
What do you
I
think?
mean,
What do you
the
think?
second's fine with me. I think that would give us a little bit more chance to think it through, and we may have to approach more than just two people because we don't know that they're necessarily going to agree to do it right off the bat, so.
Will that work? Okay, so July 2nd with names to me. And then we'll bring those names forward at a subsequent work session to kind of talk through that as to go or no go on that.
I mean, I don't know if it matters, but is there a legal reason that you couldn't kind of give us feedback on the names, or is that's probably the, like as we give them to you, can you kind of give us back the group of names, or, I mean, I don't know if it matters.
Oh, sure, I mean,
You
yeah, I
don't have
mean,
to wait until that workshop for us
no,
to.
I can send emails. I thought you meant whether it's a good name or a bad name. Thumbs up, thumbs down. No, we can certainly give you an update that so-and-so submitted these names for consideration.
It might trigger my thoughts of somebody to,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
really good.
yeah.
And if it's okay, I can follow up to all of you with an email, maybe tomorrow, or the following day, just kind of, this is kind of what we're thinking is you all submit a couple of names per person by July 2nd, and we'll give you sort of a recap or an update as names trickle in. We'll give you an update on kind of who they are, so that way you kind of keeps things fresh. Will that work?
Thank you so much for helping me out through this.
No worries. Okay, so I think that's really all we needed, is just to make sure if this is a go and sort of the process. And then, like I said, we'll bring it back to a subsequent workshop to flesh out all the names, all together as a group, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, that'll take us to B, receive an update, hold a discussion, and give staff direction regarding the proposed comprehensive land use plan and downtown master plan studies. City manager.
that's okay. All right, Mayor, members of council, your city manager, Mario Canizares. Just wanted to give the council a recap. Would certainly be happy to go through these slides quickly so that we have plenty of time for Q&A before your regular meeting. Just wanted to give a timeline recap of where we've been up to this point. As you can see on your screen, this started back on December the 15th with the workshop with the previous city council, then a subsequent workshop about a month later with direction to proceed. And then you can follow the timeline about the RFQs that were published in the Daily Sentinel, along with sent to a number of planning association, professional associations from a procurement perspective. And then it was March along, into March, later March, the deadlines for the RFQs were submitted. We received 13 submittals for the downtown plan, 13 for the downtown plan, 10 for the comprehensive land use plan, that's a really good number. We've met internally as a panel to review those RFQs and to whittle it down to some finalists to interview. Along the way, we had election May 1st. We received a new mayor, new council member, and so then we did the interviews. The panel did the interviews on the 11th of May and the 13th. We had a workshop on May 18th once the new council was fully seated to give just an update on where things were. If you recall, you all suggested and directed that we would have some public meetings. So we originally suggested one. We added a second one, and so we had ours last Monday, the June 7th and June 8th. And we also discussed at that May 18th to incorporate a couple of committees, one for each study. So what we've done to date, we've established a project website. It's www.nacogdochesplans.com. In that contains basically just about everything that we have up to this point. The original comprehensive land use plan from 2003, the downtown master plan for 1974. We have the minutes and the video from the previous workshops that I mentioned to you earlier from December and January, and should have links for the one that we had in May. We have past presentations, a whole slew of information, the RFQs, as far as the actual RFQ document that was submitted. That's out on the website as well. We also posted on there links to the committee page so that applications could be filled out by interested parties to participate in a committee. We also posted a survey document, and so that's what's been kind of working up to this point. We had a survey that closed as of yesterday, and so we'll cover that here shortly. And then we're here today to talk about just kind of where we are and how do we want to proceed. So kind of give you an update on last week's community meetings. We had two, as mentioned. We had one on June 7th, Monday, at Commercial Bank and Trust there in the community room, or Commercial Bank of Texas in the community room. We had certainly unprecedented attendance at that meeting. We had literally standing room only with 165 in attendance. We also had a meeting the following day at the C.L. Simon Rec Center with about 155 in attendance as well. And again, we did have in some areas standing room only for that because I think all chairs were taken up. At both meetings, we had hearing impaired services and translation services for Spanish speakers. And so I thought that was kind of a neat addition to be able to add that, to be able to provide that service to those constituents. With the survey we received, and again on the presentation, and it's not in your original slides in the backup, just because we didn't know what the responses would be. So if you see on the screen in purple, the survey recap where it says new, I just wanted to mention to you that as of yesterday at 5 p.m. when the survey closed, we received 238 survey responses, which I thought was really good. And the survey was really based 8 open-ended questions. What do you love about the city? What do you need more of? What do you need less of? Just open-ended questions. What would you say would be your vision for Nacogdoches? So it's literally provided opportunities for folks to basically just kind of almost freehand speak to what their thoughts were. So, so we've had quite a bit. We had quite a bit of response. One of the things that we wanted to do to make sure that you had time to read that is we submitted the responses that we received up to last Friday. We would send those to you in an email so that you could have some time over the weekend to read those. And then we sent you a supplement packet yesterday afternoon after the survey's closed. What staff is in the process of doing is taking all the survey respondents and looking for keywords and incorporating those into a graph. I will tell you it is a very laborious process because literally we're having to read every single respondent, which is obviously appropriate, but to be able to take those keywords and put them in sort of a thematic category so that you can kind of see, kind of at first glance, what are some of the key things. And so we've been working on that. Actually, Elena Chafin, our planner, city planner, has been working on that all day today. So we've been able to knock out 3 out of the 8. So we're still in process of finishing those up. It just takes time to go through that in a manual format. So what you have here in an updated slide deck, because it's not in your packet, is basically the first 3 questions. So again, we can certainly go through those however you wish, or we can go through the survey document however you wish. But bottom line is, question 1 is, what do you love about Nacogdoches? The top respondents were the people in the community, the history and charm. Pretty close third were culture and activities, being SFA and having SFA here in a college town, and the food and drink. So those were sort of the key terms that were fleshed out in question number 1. Question number 2, a lot more comments. As you can see, that's why it takes so much time, because there's just a lot there. What are some of the biggest challenges and issues here facing our city? You know, the biggest, largest respondent was economic and business prosperity, along with employment and infrastructure. Those were the top 3. And then right behind that is entertainment options and then equity. So as you can see, there's a lot of different topics there. And so we're incorporating those into a bar graph so you can kind of see what's going on in that. On question 3 is the city plans for its future, what should be prioritized. Number 1 was economic and business diversity. 2 is infrastructure. And then 3 was employment, along with a close 4th, entertainment, and then again, everything else falls in line with just the number of respondents. And this was all based on the number of respondents and keywords that were captured and then incorporated into a bar graph. And so, so as you can see, like I said, it's a very manual process, and so we're incorporating those into an Excel spreadsheet, and then extrapolating those into a bar graph for easier read. So that's kind of where we are on the survey recap. You know, certainly, like I said, we sent you the surveys and a lot of comments throughout. You know, there were just one of the top things that I kept seeing over and over again, certainly infrastructure. Everybody wants an HEB, right there with you. You know, so those are good things, and you know, what people want less of is donut shops, some of these other things, and a lot of that's, you know, market driven, and so there's not a whole lot that the government can do on that, and those are some of those lifestyle center type merchants that, you know, people invest in donut shops because they're popular, and so, and a lot of it's based on convenience too. So there are certainly some things government can do. There's a lot of things that government can't do. But still, we're still taking the feedback, and I think it's still important. And again, Mayor, do you want me to continue through the presentation and then come back on the survey results, or I'll just have a few more slides?
Sure, I think that's
Okay. And so the next piece of the conversation that I wanted to mention, again, we can come back with the survey results, is originally mentioned when we all met with council back in mid-May, when the council was first seated, about the recommendations on the public hearings or the public meetings, and then the committee. Originally, I had suggested that it be a 9-person committee. And so as you can see, on the original makeup of the committee, it was having a council member for the comprehensive land use plan, a council member, a P&Z commission member, maybe a representative from SFA, representative from NETCO, and then 5 members from the community that would be, again, these will all be council appointees, but that you all would bring forward 5 names, whether within your ward or just folks that you know in the community that you think would be helpful in that process for the comp plan. For the downtown plan, again, another council member, a representative from SFA, a representative from the Historic Landmark Preservation Committee, and the CBB Board. One thing that I will mention, this is a typo on my part, I had representative from SFA. It should be actually a representative from the Main Street Board. So that's apologies on my part for not catching that in the slide deck. But based on feedback that I heard last week, on last Monday and Tuesday, a lot of interest in both of these subject matters. So again, your staff's hearing them, hearing the feedback, and so based on that, maybe 9 people is too few. Maybe we need to expand on the committees, and so again, and I did correct it on that. Oh, actually, that was correct because it was the original, and so this is an amended. So based on that, I just did real simple math and thought, one of the things that's a component of our comp plan, because it's such a vital aspect of it, is Nacogdoches ISD, and then I noticed that in my original recommendation, we didn't have a representative from NISD. So I thought maybe we should add an NISD representative, whether it's a staff member or a board member. It's really the council's call. So that's a new addition to that process, to that group. And then the thought would be, instead of having 5 folks coming from council, maybe it's 10. And so that would take the committee from 9 to 15 on the comp plan. And then on the downtown plan, again, it would be a council member. That's the NAC Main Street rep, Historic Landmark Preservation Committee, CBB board member, and then 10 people instead of 5 from the community. Those are sort of the changes that were made. And again, certainly we can make it bigger. We can make it smaller. I'm just telling you that the bigger a committee gets, the more difficult it is just to get people present, because again, these projects are long. The comp plan, if we were to go forward, it's a 12 to 16, maybe 18-month project, and a downtown plan, if again allowed to go forward, could be as short as 10, could be as long as 12. So that's a long commitment for 15 and 14 people to be fully engaged in this process. So that's why, just be cognizant of, if we get too big, it could be a challenge. And again, all of these committees, regardless of whatever size, would be open to the public, and that would certainly be appointed by City Council. So really for discussion today is a couple of things. Maybe, I guess it's 3. Is one, certainly about the feedback that you saw in the surveys, and we'll park that for just a moment. But really, it's just on the committee application review process. And it's, how do you want to do that? Do you believe that we should if you want to proceed with this, do you want to make the committees larger or keep it the way it was? And if you do, how, because we do have an application process. Applications are due at the end of June. You certainly could stay with that deadline, or if you need to extend it, you're welcome to. I believe, Jan, you said, how many do we have so far?
We have, for the comprehensive plan, 26 applications, and for the downtown master plan, 14.
So a good number so far, and we still have a couple of weeks left. And so really, at the end is if the deadline comes and we stick with that original deadline, then really, how do you want to proceed with trying to whittle it down to 15 and 14 respectively? Do you want to go through the same process that you're using for other boards and committee appointments? Do you want to, if we get a lot of applicants, do you want to review those applications first and then narrow it down to a few that you would then want to interview and then go through an appointment process? That's really the direction we're trying to get to, so we know kind of how to work through the process to meet certainly your needs and expectations, number one. And then secondly, really just based on the feedback that you heard last week, the feedback that you have received through the surveys that you've received, is how do you want us to proceed? Do you want us to proceed with the remainder of the procurement process and bringing to you a recommendation for each study, or something different? So with that, open it up for any questions.
You mentioned the survey, you're gonna talk more about the survey, or
Well,
not?
it's just really more in line of just, is there any feedback that you want to drill down on, or if there's any comments that you saw that stood out or something? I mean, again, we're trying to summarize all 8 questions. It's just taken longer than we thought, and so we were able to get not quite halfway there, but we'll hopefully be finished by a good portion of it tomorrow, and then maybe early Thursday. And then once that summarization is completed, certainly would be happy to send it to you all so you can see that. Because, I mean, there's a lot of reading, but also you can see the summarization of those results.
Okay. And I'm sure, and just so the audience knows, we have all received the survey results, and I would say we've probably all been through the group.
And we will definitely put the survey results online on that website. So just wanted to get through today, and then we'll post it.
Right. Okay.
So that's all my comments I had, Mayor, unless there's some questions you want directed at me or the staff, and
Yeah,
then we can go from there.
let's go to public comment, I
Okay.
think, would be the next thing. Is there anyone who would like to make comment? Yes, sir, Mr. Moore.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Mario. I think he's done an excellent job, and y'all did a great job hiring him. I've talked to him, I think, 2 different times, and watch how you handle the snowpocalypse. I was pretty impressed with everything he's done and pushing this forward. And I'd also like to say, I'm really in favor of doing this plan. It's going to be a great idea. There's nothing wrong with the old plan, I don't think, but, you know, it's good to get the community involved. 3 of y'all who were here before, I sent you an email back in January suggesting 3 things that we do. One is have a part of the library to have materials there so people could go, and maybe some comfortable chairs where they could read about planning and what it means to do a comprehensive plan, and maybe, you know, spend some money on buy, you know, 6 feet of books or 3 feet of books or something. That was one. The second one is that we do have somebody unbiased to do an analysis of why we didn't implement the plan that we had before, and that's my opinion. I mean, maybe other people think that we actually implemented that plan, and that could be included in that report, you know, and have somebody do that. And the third and really important one is before you hire, and I think you're going to go ahead and hire somebody. I mean, I think it's going to happen, but unfortunately, I don't think there's enough community engagement with these 2 meetings that we've had right now to really get people involved and engaged. So when the professionals do show up here and they go through their dog and pony shows and build consensus and, you know, do the charrettes and then, you know, go away and come up with their plan and bring it back and deliver it to us, which will probably be, you know, the end of 2022, I guess, you know, about 15, 16 months, I think is what they're estimating, that there will be a social infrastructure in place to actually implement that plan, and it won't be like the previous plans, the 71 plan, the 94 plan, the 03 plan, that nothing really happened. It was just a fun thing to do, and they are fun. Believe me, they are fun. I've done a few of them. So I would still request that you do those 3 things, but if you don't want to do that, I would ask that what you do for the next 15 months while this planning process is going on, you know, go through the current plan that we have right now. And I personally believe there's a whole lot of good stuff in there. I don't believe it's obsolete. And, you know, I know that you commented on that, and the 69 corridor, really, I think that's going to be, you know, construct some access roads out there. That's basically what's going to happen as they build out 69. And 69 won't become a freeway for another 2 decades, because until it connects from Houston up to I-20, it's not really a interstate corridor. But what you do is you pick 2 or 3 things that are in that plan that you all agree are a good thing, and then you actually implement those things. You go through the process of implementing that, and there's really only a few things you can do to implement them. 1, you can create policy or legislation. 2, you can allocate resources to it in the budget. And the third thing you can do is provide oversight to ensure that staff, you know, makes the vast majority of their decisions. You know, probably 98% of the decisions about the city are made by staff. And so, you know, review what staff is doing and ensure that those decisions are implementing the plan, so that when we do get the plan in a year and a half from now, that we've built up the the implementation muscle so that we can actually implement the plan and we won't go through another 20 years. And in 20 years, we're gonna be jumping in our cars and punching in, Museum of Fine Arts in Houston and jump in the back and go to sleep and wake up and be there. I mean, there's gonna be so many changes that we're gonna see over the next 20 years. To go through this whole process of not doing anything for another 20 years is gonna be a terrible thing, so. And finally, I would like to say, I think we elected the right guy for mayor up here, because as I saw, as we looked at the results of the survey, the one thing that was the most important to me was environmental protection. Didn't even make the list. So I do not represent the vast majority of the citizens of Nacogdoches, because the thing that's most important to me doesn't even, I didn't fill out the survey. Maybe I would have made one person, I got a little bitty bar on there, but it didn't account. So we picked the right guy to be the mayor because business and money is number one important thing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Never seen you at a loss for words.
Doing such a good job.
I knew it.
Since you got this crowd together.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council, for opening up the meeting today. I just wanted to commend you on the job you've done and how reflective and serious you've taken this. I think Nacogdoches has so much potential and so much is in front of us. And I say that not just as the state representative for Nacogdoches County, but as a property owner and a business owner and somebody who's raised a family here. And so I'm really excited to see this council pull together and look to the future and come up with a plan. It's hard to know if you're gonna get there if you don't have a plan and you don't have a roadmap. I've talked to several of you individually about different things about our community, and we all share the same love of Nacogdoches. Kathleen, we had a great talk at the Blues Fest the other night, at the Bluegrass Fest, and I couldn't agree with more of what you said about the where we ought to focus. I think what you had said is reflected in the bars that we saw, the interest that the people had in those responses. But if memory serves, you said we ought to focus in the future on this being an education town, being an entertainment town, and focusing on our historical tourism. And I think all those things are going to be an integral part of the plan. So, but you saw the variety of different people and the elements that they kicked, or the things that they thought were most important to the plan. I would make this observation, that if you group those largest with the ones with the most bars, and for the record, I think we're all concerned for the environment, but I think we got the priority straight in what was listed in those interest areas. I think the thing that they all have in common, that so many of those things could be driven by a comprehensive plan and looking at the feasibility of delivering, developing in a very productive and positive way and respectful way, those two things that made this city possible and exist in the first place, and that is the Bonita and Lenana Creeks. I think that has to be part of the feasibility study, because if you look what those can do, if they're properly developed, and I would say it's no surprise, they've been somewhat neglected through the years, but the fact remains, those are the reasons that this community has been here for literally thousands of years. And so as we go forward and look at this, you say, what effect would it have on our community from a job standpoint, for employment, for economic development, for tourism, for education, for attracting more students, to having the aesthetics, to all these things. I don't think anything fills the bill more than a good, feasible, quality program. And I would pledge my support to this council and to this community as we work forward. In my capacity as a state representative, there are a number of funds and programs, and both federal and state level, that I believe Nacogdoches presently and more importantly in the future can participate in, that makes this not a burden on the taxpayers of Nacogdoches, but makes it a real blessing. And I think this is something we can do with some good planning, forethought. And so it's going to take some work. It's going to take some people with sharp pencils doing the math and coming up with how this would work. And it's going to require a lot of different disciplines and specialties to come up with a quality plan. But these things don't come cheap. But the results of it could be so overwhelmingly positive for our community if it's done right. And I'm confident that this council and the folks that you've gathered around you and your staff and our city manager are the right people at the right time to make this a reality. Let's get a plan and go forward. So thank you for letting me speak. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, and you'll be happy to know that unless you completed multiple surveys, I'd say multiple, a few surveys, there are others besides you that want the Clardy River Walk in
Yeah,
Nacogdoches.
no, I wouldn't say it's not the Clardy River, it's Dos Arroyos, we'll come up with something, you know, the Fisher plant, there's gotta be something there. But it's gonna be bold done, I'll tell you that
Bold.
much.
Bold
That's right.
one.
Bold one, that's right. But really, I appreciate your consideration, anything else?
Thank you.
I'm gonna get back across the street and make some phone calls. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, comment now, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest to Mr. Canizares, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a politician, but I am a researcher. And I think it is a mistake to conclude that the community wants things in that order or in that magnitude, because we did a qualitative survey which asks people to
Absolutely.
say what's top on their mind, and now we're analyzing it in a quantitative way. And if you would prefer, we can get some software to pull out the keywords, but it's a misrepresentation. And so what you would do at this point is gather all these things that people said and then put them in a quantitative format so that they could rank them or do something else, because sometimes you get almost opposite results when you do it. So I wouldn't want to put that out on our website, because you'll have half of SFA coming and saying, does that make sense to you? So what happens is, what happens when you're doing a qualitative survey is you ask me a question and I tell you off the top of my head what I'm thinking, and so we write all that down. But that doesn't mean that if you didn't tell me the environment right off the bat, I might say, oh yeah, I forgot about that, that might come first. So you would place all of those items and then let people rank them, or you would do a follow-up is what I'm saying, because it could be those results, and it doesn't mean we're saying anything bad or awful. I think it's a great thing to ask the question. Sure. But it's not, the results are rarely accurate.
Right, well.
That's how people's priorities are. So we would not want people to interpret that the city of Nacogdoches has these priorities.
Well, again, the raw results are in your packet, and they'll be posted on the website. This is purely just as an at-a-glance review. This is not statistically valid. It's not a plus or minus 4%, 400 random. It's not random sample, because it wasn't. And so this is purely just an opportunity for folks to go through a website that was posted, and if you had different IP addresses, you could do the survey multiple times. And so, but if you're using the same IP address, it wouldn't allow you to do it. So absolutely, this was never intended to be a statistically valid with random sampling, because it wasn't.
But just to clarify, even what it is, it's not correct to make the assumption that these are people's priorities. Does that make sense?
It's what it is basically just taking keywords, ones that were mentioned multiple times, and just categorizing those based on the count. It's just purely an end number of survey respondents and key phrases. So the raw data can be on the website, and folks can read it for what it is. I mean, but you're right, it was open-ended questions, and had there been a group of people talking about it, it may have spurred other types of comments and thoughts, but it was just literally a snapshot. And again, at the end, please understand that this is not the only opportunity where input is given. This is just literally just the very, very, very beginning of a lot more opportunities for input and feedback, because most of it will be done through focus groups. Some of it will be done through online surveys. Just like Mr. Bolden mentioned, some of it is meeting people at their place of business or worship or their community, and so that's how some of it will be done.
Yeah, and surveys, I have an issue with it because it's not reflective of the entire city.
Correct.
I mean, if you look at some of the general answers, you wouldn't base that in certain communities, those answers, and then you would put that in a different community. Sure. So it's not reflective of the entire city. And as such, a small amount of surveys sent back is not reflective of the whole city itself.
again, I completely concur.
Ms. Fisher?
I got a lot. Do you want it all or
Yeah.
like a little bit?
Lay it on us.
Okay. So, I think we all, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. At the public forums, last week, 2 weeks ago?
It was last week.
There were, 160 something and 150 something, right? So again, not totally reflective of the community. It was nice to see some diversity in terms of race and age, and we heard some different voices, so that was nice. But understanding that was not entirely reflective of the community, because, just because you post a forum doesn't mean that people are going to show up. Having said that, what I have heard from people coming to speak to me, and what seemed to, and my impression was that resoundingly people are hungry for two things: for positive changes in Nacogdoches, and two, for they really have a desire to be engaged in this process. And I was really encouraged by what I saw at the public forums and really excited. One thing that I wanted to clear up some confusion on, and I guess in the form of, if this is in the form of a question, is am I right in my assessment of this? But when we had our work session on this, whenever it was, a month ago or whatever.
The May 18th. Yes.
Yeah, some people came afterwards and seemed to be confused about the process, and that's on us, I guess, for discussing and not being clear enough. It seemed that some people thought, some community members thought, that community engagement was beginning and ending with the two public forums, and then that we were going to pick a consultant and that was going to be done. And so I wanted to take first the opportunity to clarify that that's not the case, that from what I understand, and please correct me if I am wrong, but the two public forums were sort of a startup. I mean, again, that's not meeting people where they are. It's not doing real community outreach, and it's just posting a forum and hoping that people show up. And so it was sort of a startup, but certainly not the first and last, or even the majority of it. I think it's an unfair characterization to say that once the consultant comes in, it's going to be a dog and pony show of community engagement. I think that's on us to make sure that the community engagement that happens when the consultant is here is real and deep and comprehensive. And I think that there's an agreement from everybody here that we're serious about that and about pursuing that. Something else, and Mr. Moore came and spoke, and has also, is true, sent a couple of emails, and I heard a couple of comments at the public forums too, and so I would like to address it, just because I don't want it to seem like it's being dismissed without being given any thought. And that's the concern regarding, or the request that some sort of an analysis or an audit be done of why the 2003 plan wasn't implemented. My thought on that, I certainly agree that if you fail at something, or if you make mistakes in something that you do, that you learn from your mistakes. I learn from my mistakes in trial all the time. If you look at the 2003 plan, which I also agree was a very good plan, and you look at the people in leadership positions and in the task forces, and none of those people are here anymore. And so I guess I'm a little bit confused as to, I mean, how something like that would even play out. Like, would you go find the people who were involved and interview them? Would you go through every single meeting and see where it was that the comprehensive plan wasn't discussed? I really love what you said, Mr. Moore, at the end, about really focusing on creating a structure to put in place to implement this, an accountability structure and an implementation structure. Because I do think it's right. It's a lot of money, and we don't want to look down 20 years and be like, oh, we never did anything and it was for nothing. It was, And so I am all for that, and I think that that would be a better use of taxpayer dollars and of time to, while this is moving forward, figure out some sort of accountability system to make sure that, and I know that that depends on a lot of things, and this is a democratic process, and so we have elections, and people come and go, and so it depends on political will, and maybe we don't like you anymore, and you're out of here. And so there are a lot of moving things in establishing some sort of an accountability implementation structure, but I would be all for something like that, and it seemed to me like something, again, just based on the surveys and the community forums public forums, sorry, that the community would want. But I do want to be clear that, at least speaking for myself, I want to make sure, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that whoever it is that ends up being hired takes community engagement as seriously as what I feel like all of us do. And I asked you no questions there.
But can I make a statement?
Sure.
Wholeheartedly agree that those forums is not over. It's just, really the beginnings of it. That's also why we're recommending a committee, to help with that accountability too, because it's folks that you appoint can help drive that process as well, as far as making those connections in the communities that certainly the consultant's not going to know because they're not from here. And we may not know fully just because we don't have those relationships. Those committee members can help that, and certainly you all can too, and certainly we will through that process. In regards to the past plan, especially the comp plan from '03, there is a section in the comp plan, it's chapter 13, it's called implementation. So one thing I would suggest is, as part of the scope of, if, again, this is all being somewhat presumptuous, if we go down the path of this, we could just, as part of the scope of the consultant, because as Mr. Moore mentioned, an unbiased third party. That's the whole premise of bringing on a consultant, is to have an unbiased third party review of everything that we do, because it's not about telling us what we want to hear, it's what we need to hear, okay? So my suggestion would be, add to the scope of the consultant, if we go down that path, and have them do a scorecard of this implementation. And just give us a grade. Go through chapter by chapter, strategy by strategy, of what did we do, what did we not do. I mean, if it's an A, great. If it's ongoing and it's still processing, great. If we failed, or F, or whatever the metric needs to be. But, for example, there's a lot of different things in here that should be done on a regular basis. One of those is major plan updates. It should occur every 5 years. It has not been done. By the time we're doing this, if we finish this, it will be 20 years old. In the past, staff has requested for updates to be done, and it didn't make it as a priority. Why? It wasn't a priority. You have other council in the community had other priorities, and it just didn't make it up the chain. There's talking about capital improvement plan. We're working towards that. Goal settings, things of that nature. It talks about updating on an annual basis with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Again, those are just those procedural things, those SOPs that could easily be done. It could be part of the scope of a Planning and Zoning Commission board to have that on an annual basis. And that's part of the tickler file that the city planner should have on an annual basis, whether it's at the end of January because you're doing it on a calendar basis, or if you're doing it on a fiscal year basis, maybe you push it up to November, depending on the cycle. But that's part of that process. And so you go to Planning and Zoning, you're supposed to give a report to Planning and Zoning Commission. You're supposed to get an update to Planning and or an update plus show the changes, and then probably a report to City Council. All that can be built in from a procedural perspective. And at the end, the city manager is accountable to make sure this happens. And if it doesn't happen, then you hold me accountable. The whole reason why you hired me is to make substantive changes on the way we do business. And that's what we're trying to do. And so all I can ask is that you give us a shot to make this happen. And if we don't, then you hold me accountable. And then I need to hold my staff accountable accordingly. And then as part of the process, when you appoint boards and commissions, That's part of the conversation when you interview them. Do you know that on an annual basis, you need to do this, especially if you appoint new board members? And again, I'm not saying making it that simple, but it's just that, literally that programmatic as far as what you do. So again, my suggestion would be that as part of this process, if we're directed to go forward, is that we add that as part of the scope of the consultant, is to give us a scorecard of this implementation. It's right here. It's all encapsulated in about 15 pages. Either we did it or we didn't.
Don't you think some of the items in the objectives there were beyond our control? They weren't actionable items.
Sure.
We need to have things that we can control.
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of things that are somewhat aspirational. But there are things, again, it's just very cut and dry. Did you report to the Planning and Zoning Commission or didn't you? Do you have a CIP or don't you? Did you update the plan every 5 years or didn't you? I mean, there are various things that are just very, very objective, but there are a lot of things that are certainly out of your control. I mean, who would have thought that, certainly all these various recessions and certainly a pandemic, that never was contemplated. But some of these things are out of control. The original plan called for I-69 to be on the west side of the airport. It's not even, that wasn't even in the city limits. It's very much so in the city limits now. So it's to our favor, but obviously we needed to plan accordingly. And so the demographics have changed. I mean, a lot of things have changed in the last 17 years that I think this plan, a new plan, needs to be reflected of. And so, but yes, sir, there are a lot of things that are out of control that we couldn't do. And that may be just part of the commentary that the consultant gives you is, this is something that the city really can't objectively control because it's out of their hands. Legislature maybe has taken that power away. The economy has changed, and it's no longer really something that can be done anymore.
Or we hold them to actions that are within our means.
Sure, right. So,
Anything else?
No, I like that idea, and the other thing that I wanted to say that I forgot is that I also like the idea of once we have the plan complete, and whoever's sitting up here on council, I liked Mr. Moore's idea of picking a few things and prioritizing and taking actionable steps to, okay, these are 1, 2, or 3 goals that we want to accomplish in the next X amount of time. What do we do to get there? Because I agree that a lot of the objectives, some of them that are still, that still make sense today are because they are actually very vague, sort of, they're not actual concrete steps. They're like infrastructure improvement. That's probably always going to be relevant. And so, but I like that. I like taking some priorities and then creating actionable items that we can actually, or steps that we can actually take toward implementation. I also like the idea of procedural safeguards. I call them procedural safeguards, but whatever, those procedural little mechanisms that you put in place to make sure. Oh, and something else that I've seen you do on agenda items, you state what each agenda item has to do with Mario, and what priority it's advancing. I think that that's something that's helpful because it helps us it helps us have this like longer term, okay, why does this matter thing in mind, as opposed to just, okay, going through the motions or
I understand it's purely an accountability tool.
Yeah.
So at the end of some period, we can say, you know what, we had so many items under this priority, and what did it actually affect?
And it seems simple. It seems like a simple thing, right? But I think it's actually really helpful, and I imagine that there are plenty of things that we can do similar to that to build in accountability and implementation strategies.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay. Mr. Anderson?
Honestly, most of my questions for Mario have already been answered, and a lot of those were to do with the idea of building in some annual reviews at multiple levels and with multiple city boards as they're applicable. And beyond that, I'm glad that we started with, I agree that I think a lot of people thought that the forums that were held last week were going to be sort of the bulk of the public input. And I understand why they had that perception, because the plans that have been created in the past have been done so with comparatively very little public input. And that, to me, is a very important part of why I'm in favor of doing this now, is that we have the opportunity, and I think we have the commitment on council to ensure that a new plan does include a significant amount of broad input from the community. And as long as we do, in fact, build in that accountability, those various measures,
And one suggestion I would make too, again, this is way down the road, is to build in, codify it. I mean, at some point, council has to adopt this. I'd assume you adopt it by either resolution or by ordinance, and we'll talk with the city attorney on the proper method. But if some of those things that you build in, those accountability factors, annual review with the Planning and Zoning Commission, annual presentation and review with City Council, I mean, we can build those things. You don't want to constrain yourself that you're just, but these annual reviews can totally be built into that. And I'm sorry, include some language, strive to update, again, with resources permitted, strive to update the plan on a regular basis, 5 to 7 years,
Yeah, and I think even building in some language to make that more specific might be a good idea, and build in probably using a third party to do a review of how we've done over that 5-year period, so that we're getting that outside feedback on a more regular basis rather than just when we create a new one.
I spoke to a constituent who had the same issues with not really understanding what the plan was, and they thought that we'd take the survey and then we would take the information that we got from the forums, and that we would box that up and give it to the consultant, and they would go back to their ivory tower and they'd write a plan for us. And so what I want to make sure that the consultant understands is the bar graph that Ms. Chafin presented to us, and that's that community engagement lasts the entire time. It's the brown line that goes from side to side of the page. And so that's a must, I
Absolutely.
think, as we're working with.
You have my commitment on that.
Anybody else?
I have several things.
Okay, have
So,
at it.
first of all, Mr. Bolden, did you want to go first?
I've already been, go ahead.
Okay, well, I've already been too, a little bit. To me, the key point of the survey were the comments at the end, because what people want, what they don't want, that will come in a comprehensive plan. And again, it'll come in a different way. But the comments at the end and the comments at the meeting were very, very strong, many of them, and also addressed slowing up. Many of them asked to slow the process up. Several people asked about the funds. We're the only ones who read the comments, I believe, right? Nobody else did. So I had several thoughts about the precursors to actually hiring somebody. And many of the comments, though some of them might have said, oh, I want to get my own idea in first, and obviously showed that they didn't understand that would come in the comprehensive plan. There were several that said these are precursors to the comprehensive plan, or we shouldn't do it. Instead, we should take the funds and actually fix things instead of doing a comprehensive plan. So here are some of the precursors that I wrote down. One is there are people here in Nacogdoches who did work on the other comprehensive plan, and it might be a very good idea to bring them together just for lunch and see what they learned, if they had some ideas. Mr. Bartlett was part of it, and Ms. Philpott was part of it, and there are a lot of other people who were part of the comprehensive planning. So just to get their ideas from the last comprehensive plan. I think it's a mistake to say, oh, we failed on this because we didn't implement it, because we're always in a moving, as you were pointing out, Mayor, we're always in a moving. We may not have wanted to implement it 5 years later. It's okay. So you want to monitor those. But they might have some really good ideas. The other is that there's some grand ideas, big ideas, that we might have to flesh out before we actually then hire a contractor. For example, Representative Clardy was talking about the creeks. It was a fascinating evening because I met somebody who said, well, congratulations, Kathleen. And I said, well, is there anything that you're really interested in? And he said, I'm really interested in the creeks. I don't want anybody to touch them for environmental reasons. So whatever people are talking about building on the creeks or making a river walk or whatever, I don't want that done. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then as soon as I got my lemonade, I bumped into Representative Clardy, who said, we really need this. So that, even fleshing that idea out, putting it out in the open, discussing that prior, because everything will revolve around it. If we decide to do something on those creeks, it really will impact a lot of the downtown planning. And so to have open meetings, put people together to see if there's environmentally sound ways to do it, but flesh that out before we even hire a contractor. We might even want to hire a contractor with specific skills if we're going to be doing something that major. So that's another thing that we could do, and probably for due diligence should do before we actually progress into that. Another thought I had, which may or may not, there are some very, very deep issues about community engagement, and some key things that we might want to identify first to give a contractor. So, for example, when we're talking about the African American community in historic Nacogdoches, we're talking about Church Street, Shawnee Street, some really E.J. Campbell School, to identify the things beforehand that we want to make sure aren't touched or that are covered or whatever, precursors. And that can be done in task forces too. You know, what, and same with the people, Friends of Historic Nacogdoches, other communities, Native American communities, because in this larger setting, those communities could get lost. So as a precursor, bring them to the table, ask, look, start thinking about where you want to go and what you want to protect and what you want to think about. We've talked about protecting, of course, the historic sites we've already mentioned, but what about the ones we don't know about yet, and helping these communities to get them? So, and one final thing, and I'm so sorry to be throwing out all these, but there was quite a bit of talk about going to a variety of different cities and saying, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And other people saying, well, that's not comparable. We had business people who said, well, that community is not comparable. So I actually did some more research to identify what Nacogdoches was comparable to. And I did this using something called the Rural-Urban Continuum Codes. And that shows every county in the United States, they don't do it by city because cities change their boundaries all the time, but every county in the United States. And it looks at the population density, the urbanicity, and whether it's adjacent to a metro center. And what was interesting to me when I did that is I found that Nacogdoches is one of only 92 counties in the entire United States, less than 3% of the counties, that has a higher population but is not anywhere near a metro center. So how we plan and who plans and who helps us, that impacts a lot of the things we think about. One person talks about it as a donut hole. So we're not comparable to Bastrop, we're not comparable to Georgetown, we're not any of the ones that were mentioned. I actually wrote them all down. They're considered ones on this 1 to 9, and we're a 5. We're nowhere near. So as we think about it, those, I think we might want to do a little bit more research into what those counties look like, even before we hire the planner, because we might want to say, wait, have you done any planning in a town of our size that is not near, and we can use the codes, you know, that is not near a metro center. That's key, because what works in one area that has metro feeding it, population centers might not work where we are. The whole idea of task forces is a huge way to engage people, and if we started them up now, even before we actually chose a contractor, we would follow up on engaging the community. We would still be moving toward comprehensive planning, and then that would enlighten us about who we might pick and who we might not want to pick. So that's just a little summary of my thinking there. If we bring all of these people, these 300 people plus people together in both rooms, and so many of them said, wait a minute, I want to slow this down. I have questions ahead of time. I want to know about the costs. I want to know exactly what will be done. If they all come together and all of those comments that said that, and we say, nope, we're just going to wait and go ahead and hire it, I think that is like a terrible mistake, and because we're in community engagement.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things is any plan that's developed should have a timeline. And whether it's a 1 year or a 5-year timeline, and at that time frame, priorities should have been set prior to that, at the beginning. And at a 5-year timeline, it should be looked at by city councils, city managers, et cetera, and look at where we have advanced in it, where we failed in it, and the reason behind the failure. And if it's up to date and we are okay with where we are at a 5-year time frame, then set on another set of priorities. We don't want to give a whole lot of priorities at the beginning, because everybody's going to want their part of it. Let's do it right now. That's not going to happen. But we have to look at the priorities as how we feel like the city can actually complete so many steps. Because if you take 5 priorities and complete none, it's a waste. It's to whether you can do 5 priorities and complete 2 or 3. You made progress. And one of the other things, I know we talked about donut shops, et cetera, but economic-wise, that's a business for minorities. And if you look at certain communities, economic development is the key to providing housing, businesses. We don't do that in certain communities. And of course, that is, I think really we are sort of lacking economic development, the city as a whole. So that's the only thing that's going to, as far as keeping certain communities involved in the city, because right now they're separated. There's quite a division between the city as a whole and certain communities. But I think economic development would bring that back as a whole. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I've got to say, okay, timeline-wise, quick question. Timeline-wise, if council votes, if the direction, the majority of direction given tonight is, okay, we want to hear a finalist and we want to move forward with hiring a consultant, what does that timeline look like? Like when, yeah.
Well, excuse me, at the earliest, we would bring a recommendation to you at your July, is it 20th? July 20th meeting, at the earliest.
Okay, and then say you bring a recommendation and say council votes to approve it, when do they start?
We would probably issue, just typical, we would issue a notice to proceed, just a letter, so they would probably start arriving within 30 days, so probably mid-August, maybe 1st of September. they'd probably start at least arriving to start having initial meetings with city staff, with the committee, and then start to, go through the game plan of, okay, we're going to start doing laying out the game plan for community engagement for the next 6 weeks or so.
Interacting with us?
Sure.
While they're doing that?
Absolutely, yeah, we can do workshops to introduce you to the consultant and Planning and Zoning Commission, yes, absolutely. We would absolutely do that.
I will say that my impression of the comments at the public forum and from the surveys, which again are not fully representative of the entire community, but also from constituents who have reached out to me separately after watching it online or watching these meetings online. There were maybe some people who said slow down, but I wouldn't call that the majority. That was not my impression. My impression was that people are excited and that we've needed to see these kinds of changes that they're talking about for a long time.
Mr. Anderson?
I would agree, that was my impression. There are certainly some people who would like to see the process slowed down, but between the online surveys and being at both forums, I did not hear that from a majority of people speaking or responding to the survey. Certainly what Councilmember Bellinger addressed are things that need to be part of the process, without a doubt. But I don't necessarily agree that they need to be part of the process before we start looking at who to hire. They need to be put out there as requirements for the candidates. But beyond that, I think, looking at someone who has experience in a community like Nacogdoches is going to be part of the selection process anyway. I mean, it is for me. I would not hire a firm that had only done suburban metro area communities. That wouldn't make sense to me at all. So my assumption is that will be fleshed out as part of the hiring process anyway.
How long would it take because I agree that I don't think that Nacogdoches is the same as Georgetown, so how long would it take to come up with a list of comparable communities based on that metric that you were talking about?
Have any of the top three done any work in a more isolated, smaller town? I don't think I saw any of them.
I don't know. I mean, the database that I'm not familiar with it, so.
Well, basically, we're talking about a town of our size
Sure.
that has no metro anywhere around
Sure.
it. That's basically, so like Huntsville doesn't count, that's a one. So, because they really do have different kinds of capacities.
Could you possibly provide that information to the
Sure.
city
I can.
manager?
Yeah, in fact, I have it right.
Does that also encapsulate like a university presence and all that, so?
So what you would do is if you took a little bit of time to look at it, you would see how do these counties actually still exist and what makes them, and just at a glance, I mean, I didn't have time to do it, but go through all 92. Actually, there are only, you have to take 6 off because 2 were in Hawaii, 1 was in Alaska, 1 was in Guam, and 2 were in American Samoa, which I don't think are comparable to us. But if you take those out, you still have 86. And it looked to me like some of them might have a university, some of them might have a significant, like, national park with it that people were centered around, because what you've got is a town that's centered around something instead of having access around it, and it has a huge repercussions for other resources and as a destination. To me, it means that people have to come here as a destination. It reinforces the importance of tourism, because there's nothing, it's not like I'm going to bump over, on my way. I just hadn't thought about it till I started listening to all of the cities. and started thinking, wait a minute, what is it about Nacogdoches? And then why might this be important in planning, and what would it? And so, for example, let's just take what we were talking about the water features and the creeks. To me, that might mean that the creeks might make it another destination because people might want to play there, but are we jeopardizing a larger motivation to come here, which is the environment and walking and all that? Because we would have to be, as you said before, a destination kind of place. It has repercussions. All I'm saying is that can be looked at. It just will take about 2 or 3 weeks to tease that out. What are the factors in all of the other 86 counties? I mean, that can be done. And also, we can look at all those comments, and to me, it's not whether you have a majority. This isn't like a vote. If there are enough people who have enough questions, it's not like don't do the comprehensive plan, but let's see if we can help ease that, bring people along, have some more task groups. For example, what I suggested before, if we're going to do a downtown plan, I think it's almost that we have to bring the downtown people, the people who put their blood and sweat and tears and their whole livelihoods, we have to bring them together even before we pick somebody. I mean, just to be polite, just to have them for lunch, say, what are your thoughts, what are your concerns, even before we enter into it. It's to me, that's, I don't know, those are just a few of them. I'm not talking about not doing a comprehensive plan. I'm talking about being thoughtful and answering people's questions and bringing them with us. Part of the idea of being isolated in this little rural urban continuum code of a 4 is we're all in this together, the city and the people, and all the people are in this together, so we should be kind of bringing us all along at the same pace, not leaving people behind. I'm just talking just a couple of months even to get some of this data, to bring those people who work together on the old comprehensive plan. For us, we could do a little thing about what we wished we'd done in the old comprehensive plan. We could do a little bit more background work. That's all I'm asking for.
And as I certainly appreciate all your ideas and thoughts and things. I do think from the comments that I've heard that the consensus is that we continue to move forward towards selecting a consultant. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to want those things that Councilmember Bellinger
Absolutely.
is talking about included in the process. But as to whether or not they necessarily inform, any element potentially could inform the hiring of a firm. But I think if we're diligent about looking at them and making sure that we have all the things in place, and if those candidates don't have one element that we're looking for, that they can demonstrate how they can not get around that, that's not the best term, but how they can work within their scope to provide what we need. Even, everybody has to do something for the first time. We're not necessarily going to have people knocking on our door who have done towns precisely like Nacogdoches. We can't expect that. We have a limited number of people a limited number of firms who showed interest or showed sufficient interest in doing this. Certainly not a small number, but it is a fixed number. And unless we're going to search down everyone that's done every town that has the same elements that apply here, and reach out to them directly if they are even still there as firms, then we could spend the next 2 years hunting down the perfect firm, or we can make sure that the firm that we hire does it the way we want them to and incorporates all the elements that we need here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that we should continue to move forward with a firm that has the experience and the knowledge and how to reach out to the entire city, all communities. And we don't do it as a request, we do it as a demand that they reach out, because we need inclusion from all of our citizens, and we don't have that right now. But I do
And
think,
not even just where it's located on the interstate or not, but its ethnic makeup
yeah.
and those types.
Yeah,
of things.
diversity.
So I think our professional, hopefully, is the one that can help us pull that stuff together.
agreed.
Okay,
So
I think
proceed,
we proceed.
and then Councilmember Ellenger's gonna send some
Provide you
some additional information
absolutely,
and,
if she will.
and kind of do some cross-referencing.
I do want to respectfully say I appreciate all of my fellow council members' ideas, but I disagree with it, but there you go. I mean, I would have liked to have had a couple of extra months for pre-community engagement. I think it would be a richer, and I think it would be more respectful, but I get it. I'm the sole dissenter here.
I mean, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive, is my
I
thought.
don't think so either.
I'm happy to help in any way, by the
Okay.
way.
Okay, so we will proceed. So again, depending on the number of data points, it may take a little longer, so just keep in mind that, so it may not necessarily be mid-July, but we'll work through the process and try to bring back obviously a solid recommendation. And that was part of the process, is why we had not made a selection of vendors, because we wanted to hear what people had to say, we wanted to hear the feedback tonight or today, and so, so that's kind of why we are where we are, as far as just kind of, we tapped the brakes on the procurement process, and that's why we wanted to get your feedback on how to proceed.
So I have one further question about transparency. Will the comments at the end be also put on, as a part of the results from the survey? The end comments?
I think
forward?
all 70-some odd
And then question
pages,
Question- the
I
last
think
question.
all 70-some odd pages will be on the website.
Including
tomorrow.
all the comments?
Yeah, all, the whole page, the whole thing, all 8 questions, everything.
Okay, the results.
Yep.
Okay, we will
All right.
move forward to open forum. Open forum is the public's opportunity to address the council on any matter related to the city that is not on tonight's agenda. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes, and in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the city council generally cannot discuss, consider, or take action on matters not listed on the agenda. Are there any, is there anyone that wants to speak in open forum? Oh, sorry, no one signed up. I apologize.
She didn't sign
Oh,
up.
okay.
I didn't get here in time to sign up. I thought it started at 5. I'm sorry.
Okay, so do you have a comment about something not on the agenda?
I believe so.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sure, come forward. Ms. Rowan.
I remember this because I've been thinking about it. My name's Mary Roan. I live at 700 Northwood Circle here in Nacogdoches. I want to say I came to both meetings last week, loved it, and I'm so excited. The second thing is, I know this is maybe even crazy after this discussion that we've just had, but the trash pickup for our leaf bags, I don't know what's going on with that. I'm just saying, I'm not fussing, I'm just saying, they're out on the street and hauling them in and out is difficult. The second thing is, and I know this maybe should go to the county, is the deer population in our neighborhood could feed the world. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be nice to get them moved or something? Everybody, ask anybody. I mean, you drive too fast, you're gonna hit one of them. I'm just saying, thank you very much. Enjoyed I didn't know what time it started, or I'd have been here. Loved it.
Your comments are perfect.
Loved
Thank
it.
you very
Thank
much for those. Not about the deer, but about the trash.
I'm just thinking barbecues.
Thank you, Ms. Roan. Okay, next is number 5, items to be removed from the consent agenda. Are there any? Okay, if y'all have had a chance to look. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I will.
Second. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. Have a discussion and provide direction regarding a request from Mission NAC for the city of Nacogdoches to waive fees for solid waste services for the 2021 Summer Works project scheduled for June 16th through 19th, 2021 by our city manager.
It's the Mario Show. I'm sure you love this, don't you?
Yeah, you can just sit over there and don't do anything.
Good evening now, I guess. Mario Ken is our city manager. Really just wanted to bring this to your attention. Received a visit, and I just went blank on the name.
Tiki Perkins.
Tiki Perkins, thank you, a couple of weeks ago, to make, number one, make an introduction. Number two, to make a request and let us know about, the city know about their upcoming program, their Summer Works project that's scheduled for June the 16th to the 19th. Many of you know Mission NAC takes on a number of homes. They bring in a ton of volunteers from all over the community to help those that need assistance through just minor fence repair, maybe some major repair to their homes, number of things that they do just to make improvements in the neighborhood. And really what the request was, to make that introduction. Number two was to see if there was an opportunity for the city to consider waiving some of the roll-off fees, the dumpster fees that go along with that project. They typically, on an annual basis, because they do a number of projects, I believe spend around $7,400 for those fees. As many of you know, with construction prices and lumber prices and material prices just in general being at the peak of their cost in forever, as far as we know, that has eaten into their ability to buy materials. They get those at a heavily discounted rate through the vendors here and other stores in the Nacogdoches area, but any assistance would help. And so really what the request is, just specifically for this event, because it is coming up, would the city council consider waiving the fees for the dumpster and roll-off solid waste fees for this specific event? And then we'd like to work with Ms. Perkins ongoing basis for other programs that they may have, but just really wanted to get this in front of you all today. And I don't know if Ms. Perkins is here. She is here. And if you have any specific questions about the program, or part of that is kind of do a shout out, part of market the event as well. If you'd like to ask her to say a few words, she'd be welcome to. She'd be happy to.
Certainly, Ms. Perkins, would you speak to us?
Excuse me, starts tomorrow, so I've been sweating all day long trying to get everything ready, so I just didn't even have time to go home and take a shower or anything, so kind of stinky, so I'll stay away from y'all for many reasons. But yeah, we just to give you an idea, this last year we had about 750 volunteers in a year, and we redid 42 homes. And when I say redid them, you can see them, and I really want to encourage you to go to the website, because there is a really good video that's done. It shows Nacogdoches from a high level and, from a zoom level. And those homes were done, like painted and scraped, and roofs and landscaping. And, we even like to leave the homeowner with like little rocking chairs and a new mailbox and some lamps, some flowers and things like that. But we are starting tomorrow. We started yesterday. We already have 2 roofs done. We had a roofing company come in from Lufkin and said, hey, if you get them off, we'll put them back on. So things like that go on. Lowe's gives us 50% off. And yet still, most of the time, the people that are volunteering are also paying for it. So any family that volunteers, they also pay $100 plus giving all of their time. So that $7,000, $400 that we spent this last year on dump fees, so much of that, we go to some pretty rough homes, We take away just a huge dumpster full of junk that their neighbors are out there just like, hallelujah, so grateful that we've done. But also just the roofs that we take off. I think this last year of the 42 homes, I think we did 16 roofs. And so our big thing is just trying to save money, but also help as many families as possible. So that $7,500 goes a long way when you're talking. And just to give you an idea, this last year we spent, of those 42 homes, like I said, I think it was 13 to 16 roofs, and then total transformation on those other homes, painted and scraped, boards replaced, windows replaced. East Tex Glass replaces every broken pane window. We replace whole windows sometimes. We build porches, all kinds of things. Whatever the volunteers can do, we do. And we only spent about $115,000. That's a pretty amazing amount of money for as much work as that's gone on. So our money is stretched very far. But when you spend $7,500 on dump fees, that was, that's a lot of money. We can do 3 more homes for that amount of money. So that's the request, is if we can hopefully work with the city. I think that right now we've got, this week, we've got First Baptist team, huge team. We've got a huge Mosaic team. We've got a huge North Street Church of Christ team. We've got black churches, white churches. We've got, just a beautiful number and cross-section of people that are volunteering. So it's a beautiful thing that's happening. And it's grown every year. This is year number 10. First year we did 3 homes. This last year we did 42. So that's the desire, that it just continues to grow.
Any questions for Ms. Parker? I would commend you, and you've done a great job in breaking into the Bright Foundation to help you with some funding in some other areas. So, I mean, it's wonderful, and increased your numbers, and we really appreciate what you do for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no
It's a
problem.
blessing.
I do think the city will participate. Is that, hopefully, will you let somebody off?
We hope so.
Yes, actually, we're hoping to, got a small group of department heads that we'd like to participate. We need to register. We'd all prefer a very low-skilled type,
We have
work, a rake and maybe some leaves and some things. We don't want anybody using power tools. It's not a good thing, so. But no, would like to do that. I think it's a good team-building opportunity, a way to give back, and even if it's just for half a day on a Thursday, we'd like to participate in that. And Mayor and Council, and the reasons part of the request that we're making the recommendation is in keeping with rehabilitating neighborhoods, and that's part of those priorities. So I think it just falls right in, hand in glove with those priorities, and it's working with a really good agency that makes a huge impact for 45 homes or more. So that's why.
And I would say 98% of the homes that we work on are low income. Every now and then we'll get a home that's not lower income because they're a member of a church that's gone into some hard times, like cancer and things like that. But I would say 98% are low income households.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Moved by Ms. Bellinger.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Bolden.
I'll third.
Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, consider approval of a contract by and between the City of Nacogdoches and LS Equipment Company, Inc. for the 2021 Seal Coat project in a not-to-exceed amount of $688,751.50. Director of Public Works.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I have tonight for your consideration approval is the award of a low bid and a contract to Lone Star, or LS Equipment Company. This is again for the second of 3 paving projects that we're going to do this year. I think Case kind of showed you a few months ago. The first one that you approved a few weeks ago was to seal cracks. This is to put a surfacing on those streets, on 32 of those 34 streets, which is what follows. So this is just interestingly enough, and to remind you, this is where we save streets. So these are not streets that are totally falling apart. These are streets that are just at the edge, and we should be able to save them for a lot of years. So this is a tremendously good investment to keep us from ripping streets out and paving them. So we try to do these programs every other year or so and grab a bunch of streets like this. So it's great. So Lone Star Equipment has worked for us on several contracts before, very successfully. And so staff can certainly recommend them to you. Just so you realize, we bid a base bid, which is the $675,000 number in your deal. We also had 2 add alternate bids where we had a little concrete curb replacement and a little concrete valley gutter replacement. And not all firms have in-house concrete workers, so they would have a subcontractor and the cost would be higher. So it gives us the ability to see that cost and decide whether to include it in the contract or not. So in this case, their cost for that work was acceptable to us, and they can do it in-house. So we're recommending that those add alternates be added, which is where we come up with the larger number for award, the $688,751.50. Be happy to answer any questions that you have after public comment.
Public comment? Okay, Mr. Anderson?
I don't have any particular questions. I have been around for at least one of these projects before, and it is a great way to save us money long-term by being able to stretch the life of these borderline streets out a lot longer. So.
Okay. Ms. Fisher?
No, I don't have any
Mr. Bolden?
No, just one question. What's the life expectancy after you put this coating on, approximately?
So we think 10 to 12 years, but I will tell you, we have some that have been on the ground 20 right now and are still suitable. So it depends on the traffic volume, Mr. Bolden, but somewhere in that range.
Thank you.
Ms. Bellinger?
Thank you for saving our streets.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's nothing further, do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve regular agenda item number B.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bolden? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Anderson. Okay, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, we'll go to C, receive a report, hold a discussion, and give staff direction on the Central Heights Area Water System. Public Works Director.
I know. Can we get this up and rolling? We good? Okay, Mayor and Council, we've talked with you in the past over past few years about the Central Heights Area Water System. It's part of our water system since 2000. And so we have some new council members as well who may not be up to speed on it. Our discussions in the past have been primarily about projects we needed to do there, getting budgets and funding. But what we've never really been able to do is quantify the problems that we've had there and try to turn those into dollars. So and I'll show you in a moment, but we went ahead and had a small brief study done to try to give us some impacts on where we had deficiencies. So again, to remind you, this was acquired in 2000. It was a water supply corporation. We were and have been the sole water source, so they didn't have their own wells. They bought water from the city. They are outside the city limits, and portions of it is even outside the ETJ. So this is basically an area from around 259 going north to about the mall community or close to 204. It's basically that strip through Central Heights, as you would see. So we've taken over that water system. We've operated it. Because they're outside the city limits, we're at 1.5 times our rate, which is by ordinance. Currently, there's about 500 connections there. We've spent about $3.8 million in the past. So when we took it over in 2000, we agreed as part of the takeover to assume their bank account, which had a little bit of money in it, and then to spend a little over $2 million on improvements right then. And then we've subsequently done some other projects out there. So we experience frequent maintenance out there. The system still has 3 flat tires, and so we limp a lot with it. And so we're very reactive. A lot of improvements are needed, and what we found out, and I sent all of you a copy of the report, but we have some significant non-compliance issues. There we go. It's all right. I'm looking at just the bifocal thing. So just to give you an idea, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, our regulatory standards kind of limits a number of things in a water system, but one of those that's an easy one to look at is the number of connections, or if you will think of meters, on a particular line. And this chart just shows you a 2-inch line, which by the way is now the minimum line size you can have. You can't have smaller than that as public supply lines, is limited to 10 connections. And you can see as you go all the way up, a 6-inch line would support up to 250 connections. Real quickly, I want to qualify that there are other components for compliance, which include how much water storage we have in tanks, how big our pumps are, so many gallons per minute per connection, what our active pressures are. We have all these or other restrictions that may be non-compliant, even if the number of connections are fine. But for the purposes of this quick study, we had our consultant help us look at the number of connections on lines because we had a feeling that they were just overloaded generally, and would give us a metric for where we needed to look at doing improvements. So here's kind of a summary of their study, and it's a lot of data there in front of you, but let me let your eyes focus on the column that has the red and green colors. So here's different segments of line pieces in Central Heights area. They analyzed the line size, the number of connections, and said you are the first line, for example, at 117% of capacity. So we'll laugh a little. One of your first green ones is County Road 102, which is a 2-inch line. It has 9 connections on it, so it's at 90% of capacity, but don't let that fool you. It's only got 1 left, so 10's the maximum. So this doesn't mean we have tremendous value left in some of these connections. So, but you can see in general, they're all red, and they're significantly overloaded. So what that means is in theory, we can't put any more connections on it. So as we get requests for single connections or subdivision developments, and that's happened recently, where we've had to say we can't support another whole subdivision connecting to this line unless the developer is willing to do upgrades to the line or help do capital. And most of the time, it's a very unachievable financial thing. It's not economical for the developer. The last developer was very far north in the system and wanted to put in a little moderate subdivision, and we need the housing, period, in our county. But they would had to have done improvements for miles, you know, so it was just not economical for 15 or 18 lots that they were trying to do. So we're experiencing this quite a bit. I will tell you, not to get off this track, but we have other areas where we extend water lines outside the city. Highway 7, Highway 21, things like that. 1878, and we do have connections out there, and we have some of these same struggles in other areas, not just Central Heights. Central Heights is just a little bit larger version of all that. So as you can see, we lack the ability to really add hardly any new connections anywhere. So this study that we gave you helped us kind of quantify that, and so I've listed out the different areas and their probable opinions of cost. There's a little break there where we've thrown some of the areas that we've always had in our capital projects planning, which is a new elevated storage tank. We have one. We need a second one for pressure maintenance. And then some pump station repairs, and then some chlorination system upgrades, because we struggle keeping our chlorine up. We struggle keeping our pressure up on top of this over connection problem. So when we add all that up, we look at new easement acquisitions where we have to buy easements, pay engineers, you know, they make $10 an hour, they're great. And so all this added up is about a $5.5 million price tag in our best estimation. Now, this is a 30,000-foot number, but I needed to give you some metric of where we are. We're not 500,000 away, we're 5.5 million away. So it's a problem that honestly we're not exactly sure how to solve. Being outside the city limits and even outside the ETJ, all these improvements that are done, and it is our water system because we took it over, but they're also being done out of the same till that our ratepayers inside the city are doing. And so those costs are distributed, and then that's just the truth. And so we've got to kind of decide where we need to go and what policies that we need. So currently, we're really unable to authorize new connections. New taps, we are requiring developers to make significant line improvements. Again, other areas outside have the same problem, and large percent of our residential development has been outside the city. Whole nother issue, whole other problem for a discussion, but it's where the requests have been coming is in these struggled areas of the end of our line. So, and again, these customers are paying 1.5 times right now. So our question tonight is to look for guidance from you about policy. So there's not a vote per se, but we would like to get some 30,000-foot feedback and see If you would like us to create a policy, called policy for in the ETJ, a policy outside the ETJ, but things outside the city limits, and how we want to deal with these. And we could bring a draft back to you, but I'd love to get some feedback to get me started on that policy of what your thoughts are. So I will tell you, Mr. Kirkland and I will visit. We talked a little bit this morning, but we have some level of obligations to serve because they're in our service area. And then at the same time, we have the ability to do some moratoriums. So we're going to explore that together more and try to give you that feedback as well and develop that into our policy so that we are meeting state standards. And you can understand the Public Utilities Commission says, hey, you can't just deny service because I may be denying it because Mayor Mize is ugly, not because, you know, we can't serve water. And so that's why we've got to have reasons for service restrictions, and we want to develop that in the policy so that it's fair and obviously follows the state's regulations. So anyway, sorry I've talked a lot, but I'd like to get any feedback you have, answer any questions you have, and give me some guidance on whether you'd like us to look at doing a policy to bring back to you. Mayor?
Maybe public comments first?
Further comment, sorry.
You sure?
I've got questions, but y'all
Oh,
ask some
yeah.
questions.
Oh, sure.
I don't know enough about it.
Can,
Very interesting.
oh, Mr. Poole, do you have any comment?
Wasn't going to, but will.
He's calling on people now, right?
I know, he is. Ed Poole, thank you for letting me speak today. Just by nature of what I do for a living, in the housing market, we are in desperate need for housing. So the growth area of our community is Central Heights right now. And it's a quandary because I've been involved in these discussions. Yes, there was a 15-lot subdivision that there's a for sale sign on now because we couldn't get water to them. And it wasn't the city's fault. I mean, the city took on a system in 2000 trying to help, and it's just become bigger than what they thought it would be. So the quandary is there's no way to tax this group because they're not in the city limits, but yet this is our growth corridor, or one of them. And so what do? I commend the city for stepping up and doing what they need to do to at least shore up the system. The Lily Grove and the Cairo water systems are both small. They have no intention of growing. They're not interested in drilling new wells. So what do? How do we add houses to an area that people want to live in? So the consequence is to fix it. How you create revenue to do that, I have no idea. And that's the hard part. You know, people make the comment, well, let's annex it. Well, that's harder than you think. So anyway, you've got a hard task before you. I appreciate you taking it on. It's necessary. Ignoring it will just make it worse. So whatever wisdom you have in your decision, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Bartlett, questions? I'm going to let the professionals, us rookies, are going to hold off till the end till we hear kind of what's been going on. Mr. Bolden, I'll let you lead off.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we sell it?
The answer would be, I think, yes, we could partition it and sell it. We've actually courted two different buyers. They were private operations companies who buy water supply corporations and operate them privately. We went down a due diligence road for a couple of months with them, and quite honestly, both of them have disappeared. So maybe we didn't put enough shine on the car when we were trying to sell it. But we have tried, and I think the door is still open to considering that.
We do get revenue from usage, right? But it's not enough to do maintenance?
So in round numbers, Councilman, we get about $300,000 a year gross receipts. And of course, I'm picking a little area out as opposed to averaging, but in general, I will tell you that probably 90% of that probably goes to cost for operations, maintenance, staff, chlorination, all the things, treating raw water. So in general, you can think about 10%-ish or so of that number. So let's just say $30,000 a year. We just completed the last little project we did was $600,000 fixing a few lines. That's a 20-year ROI. That's a 20-year, 5.5 million. Can't do the math because I think it's infinity. So the point is at that revenue, yes, it generates revenue. The cost to fix this and the cost to continue to do even minimal capital improvements far outruns that.
And you mentioned staff. You were speaking of, are you staff? Did you mention?
I don't know. Do you? Do you want me to? I might not be after tonight. It's very possible.
Well, I thought you was getting paid twice. I'm sorry.
Oh, he gets double when he works on that line?
Yeah. New business, a new homeowner, can they dig a well, their own personal well like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So in the county, the county has regulations, and this is in the county, so they have to have a minimum 1 acre site, and it has to be found to be viable for a water well. So a driller or an engineer has to say, yeah, it's feasible to do it. But typically, yes, they can put it. I will tell you, this part of the country is not the best of water wells. If you notice, all of ours are south and west of town. And so this area struggles a little more with water quality. Doesn't mean we can't find water, but it probably struggles.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, sir, thank you. This sounds like a mess. And it also sounds to me like we are, I mean, I understand the point of that being the growth corridor, but it also sounds like we, the city, subsidizing development and flight from Nacogdoches out into an area that is not within our city, at a cost to city taxpayers, because the 1.5 times rate doesn't even begin to cover
That's probably correct.
what we're about to have to invest, which is 9.28 million, and that's the 5.5 million is a conservative estimate.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for exploring whatever we can do so that the Nacogdoches taxpayers don't continue to have this burden on their back. And I mean, I know it's not a simple solution. Regarding options on policy creation, if the council were to say, yeah, let's see some policies, would you bring us different options of, okay, well, we can go this direction or we can go this direction? And would it include future development and other things? What would that look like?
Sure, and I think we can craft it however we want to craft it together, but one option would be to bring you an early kind of outline, which might have a couple of options to consider. Different for commercial development from residential, or different inside the ETJ and outside the ETJ. Different for subdivisions, again, from a single connection use. So I think we can kind of bring you some thoughts on that, and then you can kind of help us bolt it together. Putting that together in a narrative is the easy part. So yeah, absolutely. Our next pass can be just more schematic, if that's what you'd like to see.
Sure.
With options.
Sure. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thought you were gonna solve it, Mr. Anderson.
What would typically be the preferred sort of amortization timeline for an infrastructure project like this?
Would be a minimum of between 10 and 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a preferred timeline, not,
Probably practically speaking too, it's
Yeah.
probably all you could begin to do to even afford it, in my opinion.
you know, this is probably more of a hypothetical, but assuming there is no, or not sufficient stomach for a voluntary annexation in that area, and I think that's a fairly safe assumption. What might be the benefit of a municipal utility district organizing that in that area? And would that be a realistic method of actually recouping costs on the investment?
Sure. So in part of that discussion of MUDs and PIDs, and Mr. Kirkland and I have already had with Mario, have had a few of these, and Larissa as well. But in short, a MUD has to be voted on by the residents. So you would have to have a majority vote to create the MUD. That's why most MUDs are created by developers when it's a blank piece of property and there's one voter. I think we decided one voter minimum. That's a pretty easy process. When we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of folks, the chance of being able to get them to vote in a MUD so they could begin to get taxed, I would say would probably be limited.
About as good as voluntary annexation.
About as good as voluntary. And that brings up a point that I meant to mention, just to remind you, annexations change. So in the days when we took over Central Heights, there may have been some visions of annexing our way northbound. And I don't know, I'm speculating that. It's a pretty good ways, but right now, we can't go grab it unless they want us to grab it, and that's gonna be adjacent track, then adjacent track, then adjacent track. Lots of tracks between here and Central Heights High School. And so, the feasibility of us successfully being able to do that under our current laws is honestly just virtually nil. So, we visited and we hope to continue to visit with the legislature. And we talked to Travis a little bit, Representative Clardy, about helping towns like us with some kind of additional legislation or bracketing of legislation to allow us, because it literally stymies us, we can't annex. And we need to be able to reach out, not just for this purpose, discussions for other days, but we get economic development opportunities, Larissa and Mario have been looking at, that we can't, they want our services. They want fire protection, they want utilities, and they're just outside our fingertips. And we don't have the ability to get them because we have a few tracks in between us. So I think there's a whole purpose here that might change someday. But right now, these are not in an annexation horizon for us at all.
To continue along the line of asking about things that are probably not going to be popular ideas in that area, or in general, is there any chance that the county would be in a position to, or have any interest in contributing to the cost of this expansion?
It's not a question I have asked them, Councilman, so I guess we can ask. They, of course, right now, they have no fingers in utility business, at all. They rely on water supply corporations and then private sewer corporations, if that's the case.
No, yeah, I mean, just purely as a way to help
To recover it, yeah.
County constituents, yeah.
And I would think, all said, seeking, grant funds or seeking other outside support monies would probably be an alternative way that a lot would look at doing that. And we haven't, honestly, we looked at some grants here. We actually went to Austin and visited, took the Central Heights story with us before we did this study, and visited with a bunch of agencies and from the GLO to Texas Water Development Board. And so there are opportunities out there for funding. In almost all cases, they were loans, not all grants. So we didn't have a bunch of forgiveness. One reason is general criterias are low to moderate income compliance, and we couldn't necessarily meet that Central Heights-wide, and so it just wasn't an eligible candidate to get a bunch of money through conventional grant programs. Doesn't mean we'll stop looking, doesn't mean they're not there, but it's not easy find.
Well, I think barring some unforeseen gift of money, I kind of like Mr. Bolden's idea. Sell it if possible.
Okay, your school, let's hear it, Ms. Bellinger.
Well, my first question is, just in our own water bill, does it cover the cost of repairs and all the, it really does cover infrastructure, our water bill does?
Well, and I answer that question by telling you annually, when we look at total revenue and total expenses, then yes. I mean, that the water bills are structured such as to try to cover the cost of all that and then leave us some reserves that we can then apply to capital projects. So yes is the answer.
And the reason I ask that is because I know later on we'll be looking at investing in major infrastructure. So why, if the water bill is covering it, why are we going to be in,
Okay. Well, what the water bill covers is what I'm going to tell you is daily repairs, not capital project replacements. So I have, it's kind of like driving on tires that are 90% bald, but someday we're going to have to spend that reserve money out of our savings account to buy a new set of tires. But right now, what we spend every month is just to drive on bald tires. So we're doing repairs, we're doing little bits of sections, but we have no outreach capital programs to replace water lines or upsize them, and that's where that's going to come from.
Okay, our water bill doesn't cover major repairs, it only covers, upkeep, right?
Effectively, yes.
Okay. What would our water bill have to be to cover?
Well,
What, like 1.5 times, and then I'm gonna ask you about Central Heights, what would their water bill have to be?
and I don't know that I'm prepared to give you a good answer to that, because the number, well, it could easily double it. I mean, but that's something that doesn't come from a study, so I'm very cautious to answer your question. So it's going to depend, because I think you'll see that I have a list of water line needs, and I'm going to apply the same logic to sewer, that are going to far outrun what we can come up with reasonable funding for, whether it's through bonds, And whether it's through revenue bonds, whether it's through COs to fund it, we've obviously can only service so much debt in doing this. And we're gonna have priorities, but right outside the door is 100-year-old water lines. And they've lived past their life, and one of them just broke, as I said that, so, boom. But, yeah, and so the answer is, I really have more lines and things, you know, you're talking to the engineer who wants to do than we have funds to do. So I could spend more than we get. So it's gonna be a balance of priority and do we upsize? I mean, part of the reason all this planning, however that's done, all the planning's done is to give me some feedback of where we're gonna have industrial and commercial and residential. And so my 10-inch water line or my 8-inch water line may need to be a 16. And so as I do these replacements, I also need to know that information. So it's a very variable number, but yeah, it could be significant.
So what would we have to charge Central Heights, just out of curiosity,
To pay for that, I don't know, but it would be an unpleasant number.
Well, then, instead of even just selling it, can we give it to Applebee? Water
So
supply?
I will tell you, we have made just casual and early contact with Lily Grove. I'm actually on Lily Grove board, so I talked to myself one night. It was great. No, I did. I met with the board and talked to them, and I also met with operations for Cairo. So those are the two that we actually touch. Applebee comes in real close, but they're kind of all the way out. So,
And they're rich, right?
pardon?
They have money, right? in Applebee?
They you know, Applebee solvent, so I'll say it that way. So, and so we approached them and say, do you guys have any interest in even negotiating? And at the time we visited with both boards, basically they said, well, at this time we're not interested in it, because they also were aware of the condition of the system. I mean, the Cairo water system is run by an employee that used to work for us in water system, and he previously ran the Central Heights system, so he knew the Central Heights system very well. I couldn't jam him. I couldn't. I waved my hands a lot. He didn't believe me. So no, it wasn't negative. He just said, Steve, I know that, you know, when we buy it, we still have to replace the tires. Same old story. And so Lily Grove just doesn't, and this is typical of most of our water supply corps. They don't have a lot of capital. They don't. You know, they can't service debt beyond what the bank gives them, and their rates don't support a lot of reserves. And so their ability to buy systems is virtually nil, because they're scared tomorrow a well's going to go out and they've got a $200,000 downhole problem.
Well, I look forward to your magic solution next time.
Pre-retirement right there, yep. Thank you.
So now sometimes the rural systems operate, aren't there grants also for the rural systems?
So a water supply corporation, different than us, Mayor,
Right,
but a water
yeah.
supply corporation is really kind of a member-owned, it's a 501c type organization, typically. There are differences. Lily Grove is a special utility district, which is a slightly different animal, kind of in the shadow of a MUD. Without taxing authority. So there's some different organizations, but generally speaking, they can't apply for things like community development block grants under the Texas Department of Agriculture has that program. So they get the county to sponsor them typically. So the county can only sponsor one at a time. So they get the county to sponsor. Those grants are in the $250,000 range. You take out for an engineer, you take out for a grants consultant, and so they're rolling $150,000 on improvements, which you can see isn't sufficient to address much of this. So those kind of grants exist, and that's the only ones I've ever seen the rural water supplies being able to obtain.
One other.
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So why can't those subdivisions that Mr. Poole was talking about, why couldn't they have a MUD, you know, and, I mean, rather than us developing new lines and paying the cost and subsidizing actually wealthier people than the average income within Nacogdoches?
Sure. Well, and there's probably several answers to that, but one may be size. So for example, a 15, 18, 20 lot subdivision, which by the way is kind of our common subdivision size, you know, 10 to 30 lots, is probably so small that the effort to create a MUD, which could be, I think, a year, we discussed easily, a year going through TCEQ, hiring a creation attorney, hiring engineering, you know, to do all that, there's a cost. And then to go out and have a few million in what would be turned into bonds, may not be even market worthy to be able to sell those bonds. So those MUDs, Harris County has 65 or so MUDs in it. I created a lot of them and was even on a board at one back in the old days, and they were huge. I mean, these were 500,000 lot subdivisions that had, you know, significant millions in infrastructure, and so they had bonds. They were selling munis and basically type bonds, and so they were tax free, and they could sell those. But so I think small subdivisions don't fit the MUD motif very well.
Well, I agree with Ms. Fisher that we definitely don't need to be subsidizing wealthy people to move outside of the city and also impact our school systems. So we really need to have a better solution, and I encourage them to get muddy or whatever it is, you know. And even if we have to, you know, just say, well, good luck finding a house.
And Councilwoman, this is a 20-year-old problem.
Right.
And we've created, whoever the we is, but we've created it. And right now, we own it. I mean, we own it. And so those people rely on us for water service. So we've got that balance of doing what's right and transitioning all this in some reasonable format. So I think we all agree with you. We're trying to, at a minimum, not necessarily incentivize that out movement of subdivisions. And so that's why we're wanting to come up with a policy that's probably makes that a little different, makes it less of an incentive to build outside.
And
Not
Mr.
necessarily
Kirkland's gonna
punitive.
do that, right? Mr. Kirkland's gonna have that figured out.
He is really fast. He's really fast. Draft by Friday. I know
Okay.
it's coming.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate your direction.
Okay, we'll move on to D, consider appointing members to the Deep East Texas Council of Governments, DETCOG Board of Directors, and that's my item. We are allowed, because our county is over, our city is over 10,000 people, we're allowed 4 places on on DETCOG. Currently, that's Mr. Bolden, Ms. Fisher, and Mr. Anderson, as well as Mr. Hens had formerly been on that. Mr. Bolden will be the upcoming president of DETCOG, and certainly we would want him to be a part. I would like to be a part just so I can get to understand DETCOG. Mr. Anderson would continue to be a part. Is that okay? And then Ms.
certainly willing
Bellinger, if you would, I'd like for you to consider being a part. I had talked to Ms. Fisher, and she said that she would be happy to give up her spot and for you to be involved if you would care to.
I'm fine with that, or I'm fine. I don't want to rob Ms. Fisher of her.
You're not robbing me of any.
Okay.
Okay, so if that's okay with you, I would accept a motion for that.
I'll move. So move.
Okay, thank you. Second, Mr. Anderson. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, and I do think that you're all, probably, everybody has their invitation, is that, and ticket, is that right?
I just had you and Roy and Mario confirm that you were going.
Okay, and I don't know if you want to change, you could certainly do that. We get a lot of things, and so it may not have crossed your mind, but anyway, that's here. But it's not mandatory. It's available if you're available. So,
You can just talk to me and I'll give you the details.
Thank you.
okay. So we will move on to executive session. We will go into executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551087. And it is, council will, go into executive session. It is now 6:19 p.m. on May the June 15th, 2021. Thank you all. Okay, pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.087, we will return from executive session. The time is 6:43 on June 15th, 2021.
No action taken.
Oh, excuse me, no action was taken. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Meeting